What could drive a woman to shatter a public bathroom mirror in a fit of rage? And what price would she pay for a single moment of lost control? Karen Mitchell stood in the fluorescent-lit bathroom of the city's oldest community center, her breath ragged, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles whitened. The air smelled of cheap lemon cleaner, and the tiles beneath her sneakers squeaked faintly as she shifted her weight. At 38, Karen was a woman who prided herself on control over her meticulous accounting job, her spotless suburban home, her carefully curated life. But tonight, that control was slipping, unraveling like a frayed thread. It had been a brutal week. Her boss, Mr. Callahan, had humiliated her in front of the entire office, questioning her quarterly report as if she were an intern, not a senior accountant with a decade of experience. Her teenage daughter, Lily, had screamed, "You're ruining my life," before storming out to some party Karen didn't approve of. And then there was the call from her mother's nursing home, another bill, another reminder of her dwindling savings. Karen felt like she was drowning, and no one was throwing her a line. She'd come to the community center for a yoga class, hoping to find some semblance of peace. But the instructor's saccharine voice and the other women's smug, serene faces only made her feel more like an outsider. She'd fled to the bathroom, seeking a moment to breathe, to escape the weight pressing down on her chest. But the mirrors, even feet tall, polished to a cruel clarity, reflected a woman she barely recognized. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth a tight line of suppressed fury. She hated that reflection. She hated what it said about her. Without thinking, her fist flew. The mirror shattered with a deafening crash, shards raining onto the tiles like jagged tears. For a fleeting moment, Karen felt release, as if she'd punched through the suffocating walls of her life. But the euphoria didn't last. "Hey!" A sharp voice cut through the haze. Karen spun around to see a janitor, a wiry man in his 60s with a name tag reading Earl, standing in the doorway. His eyes widened at the wreckage. "Lady, what the hell did you do?" Karen's heart plummeted. Didn't mean to," she stammered, her voice small. But Earl wasn't listening. He was already on his radio calling for security. Within minutes, the community center's manager, a stern woman named Ms. Rivera, arrived, her lips pursed in disapproval. "That mirror," Ms. Rivera said, her voice cold, "was a custom installation donated by a local artist. It's worth $120,000, and you're responsible for replacing it." Karen laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "You're joking. It's just a mirror." Ms. Rivera didn't flinch. "It's not just a mirror. It's a piece of art, insured and documented. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." The days that followed were a blur of panic and dread. Karen tried to explain herself to Ms. Rivera, to the police who took her statement, to her husband, Tom, who stared at her like she was a stranger. "Karen, how could you do something so reckless?" he asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. She had no answer. The truth that she'd been pushed to a breaking point by a life that felt like a cage was too raw to articulate. The community center pressed charges, and the story spread like wildfire. Local news outlets dubbed her the mirror-smashing Karen, a moniker that stung worse than any fine. Social media was merciless. Strangers called her entitled, unhinged, a caricature of suburban rage. Her co-workers whispered behind her back, and Lily refused to speak to her, mortified by the public humiliation. Karen felt like she was standing in the wreckage of her own life, surrounded by shards she couldn't piece back together. But then came an unexpected twist. One evening, as Karen sat alone in her living room, scrolling through hateful comments online, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a young woman, no older than 25, with a nervous smile and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. "Hi, I'm Mia," she said. "I'm the artist who made the mirror." Karen braced herself for more judgment, but Mia's expression was soft, almost sympathetic. "I heard what happened," Mia continued. "I wanted to talk to you. Not about the money or the lawsuit, just why." Karen hesitated, then invited her in. Over coffee, she poured out her story, the pressure, the anger, the suffocating sense of failure. Mia listened, nodding, her eyes bright with understanding. "I get it," she said when Karen finished. "I've had moments where I wanted to smash something too. That mirror, it wasn't just glass. It was my way of reflecting the world's chaos, its beauty, its pain. I never expected it to break someone else." Mia's words were a lifeline, a reminder that Karen wasn't alone in her unraveling. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen not as a villain but as a human being. Mia even offered to speak to the community center to see if they could reduce the fine. "It won't erase everything," Mia said, "but maybe it's a start." For a moment, Karen dared to hope. She and Mia met with Ms. Rivera, who seemed softened by Mia's presence. They agreed to a payment plan, still crippling but less catastrophic than the original $120,000. Karen felt a flicker of gratitude, a sense that maybe she could rebuild. She started therapy, began mending things with Lily, and even apologized to Tom for shutting him out. But life, as Karen was learning, rarely offered clean resolutions. A month later, she received a call from her lawyer. The community center's board had reversed their decision. They wanted the full $120,000, plus legal fees, citing public pressure and the need to set an example. Worse, Mia had vanished, no phone number, no address, no trace. Karen learned from a local art gallery that Mia wasn't even her real name. The young woman had been a drifter, a transient artist who'd left town as quietly as she'd arrived. The betrayal cut deep. Karen had trusted Mia, had believed in her kindness, only to realize it was a mirage. Had Mia been playing her all along, offering false hope to toy with her emotions? Or had she simply been a fleeting light in Karen's darkness? Unable to stay, Karen would never know. The lawsuit drained her savings. She and Tom sold their house, moving into a cramped apartment. Lily, now distant and resentful, spent more time with friends than at home. Karen's job became a daily gauntlet of pitying glances and whispered gossip. The world saw her as a cautionary tale, a woman who'd let her anger define her. One evening, Karen drove back to the community center. The new mirror gleamed under the fluorescent lights, identical to the one she destroyed but somehow colder, less alive. She stared at her reflection, searching for the woman she'd been before that fateful night. But all she saw was a stranger, etched with regret. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, letting the weight of her choices settle into her bones. The fine, the humiliation, the loss of her home, they were all consequences of a single, impulsive act. But the real cost was deeper, more insidious. It was the trust she'd lost in herself, in others, in the possibility of redemption. Karen turned away from the mirror and walked out into the night, the squeak of her sneakers echoing in the empty bathroom. She'd learned a bitter truth. Rage could shatter more than glass, could break a life, and some pieces could never be put back together. ND